Federer is by far and away the greatest rivalry in tennis history, and we're tempted to say that it's probably the best in sporting history too. Everything was iconic about it from the first minute to the very last. We'll dive into what made it so special and why it's the greatest rivalry in tennis history. Let's dive in. First up, how did it all begin? The year is 2004 and the world of tennis is awestruck by this 22-year-old from Switzerland who's just beginning his remarkable journey of complete domination in the sport. However, before he starts all that, Federer is getting ready for a matchup against the up-and-coming teenager from Spain, Rafael Nadal. The 17-year-old was best described as a player who will give it his all on every single point. That's exactly what he did, but he didn't have to play out a long, drawn-out match like we'd get to see in the upcoming few years. It was relatively simpler, which made it more perfect. Rafael Nadal triumphed over the world number one in only 70 minutes, winning 6-3, 6-3. Federer realized almost immediately that he'd met his match because it wasn't just a blip, it was pure domination, and Rafa completely outplayed Roger, and that's where the true rivalry began. However, just for any future tennis trivia, the first time Federer and Nadal played against each other was not in Miami. It was actually in Indian Wells in 2003, and Rafael Nadal partnered with Tommy Robredo to beat the Swiss duo of Federer and Yves Allegro in 3. This is important to our story, but we'll get to it later. Up next, the famous rivalry. Their next meeting wouldn't come until Miami in 2005. This was another superb start to the match from Nadal, who dominated the number one tennis player in the world, winning the first 2 sets before normal services resumed as Federer came from behind to beat the Spaniard. Only 2 months later, the duo would meet for the first time in a Grand Slam, both players chasing their first ever French Open title and Nadal chasing his first Grand Slam as well. Made for fantastic viewing, it became quickly apparent that Nadal was simply outrageous on the clay and somewhat of an anti-Federer. As far as the Swiss maestro was concerned, Nadal went on to defeat the world number one en route to his first of a staggering 14 Roland Garros titles. Moving on, the golden years. We call these the golden years of Fedel. These are because Roger Federer, despite getting humbled in almost every meeting against Rafa, was the best player in the world by a fair margin. He was defeated every single player, but just couldn't hack it against Nadal. For instance, Federer's run of 56 consecutive hard-court wins was ended by Nadal when he defeated Federer in the 2006 Dubai finals. He would improve his finals record against Federer by defeating him in the finals of Monte Carlo, Rome, and the French Open in the same year, and then Roger's time finally came with the clay season ending. Roger would improve quite a bit in the latter half of the season, but just couldn't improve his head-to-head mainly because the majority of their meetings always came on clay. Rafa, on clay though, wouldn't give an inch to Federer, and he would return the favor at Wimbledon. Also, the duo never met in the US Open. On a side note, while the two players ended up playing each other 40 times in their career, somehow, the two never met at the US Open. It's a mystery as to why the two never met at Flushing Meadows, but it was probably never meant to be. In fact, they were quite close to meeting on many occasions. For instance, Rafa lost to Andy Murray in the 2008 semifinals, with Federer waiting for the finals. Juan Martín del Potro defeated Nadal in the 2009 semis to set up a meeting with Roger. Similarly, Djokovic had arrived onto the scene in 2010 and 11, defeating Federer both times to face Rafa, and Federer lost to Robredo in the 2013 fourth match, surprisingly, with Rafa waiting in the wings for a match. The most recent instance was in 2017, when Federer endured some more pain by Del Potro in the quarterfinals of the 2017 US Open. Nadal was in the semis and would have faced his greatest rival to compete the set, but as fate would have it, Federer just couldn't make it, and now Federer retired. This is something they'll never be able to tick off. Despite all that, we enjoy some fabulous meetings between the two tennis players. Let's get back to it. Let's look at some iconic Federer moments. Most of the Federer meetings came at a crunch moments, considering the two were top-ranked players and would almost always meet either in the semis or the finals. With that much on the line, you were almost sure to get the best experience. Starting with the 2006 Italian Open final, this wasn't the first 5-setter they competed in, as Federer had won a thriller earlier against Nadal in their second Miami Open meeting. Still though, this one remains iconic for many reasons. Some analysts rank this as the greatest match they've ever played, and it wouldn't be wrong considering it had everything. Surprisingly, it's the longest match the two ever contested. Going 5 hours and 5 minutes of brutal action, Federer took the first set after a 7-0 tiebreak, Rafa took the second with a 7-5 tiebreak, a 6-4 third set put Nadal in the driving seat, but the world number one produced a top-class effort to force a decider. The fifth set was pure class. Fantastic tennis and pressure meant that Federer bottled up multiple match points before Nadal took 4 consecutive points to seal one of the greatest wins of all time. Second, the 2007 Wimbledon final. More people are familiar with this one, and not for the 2008 Wimbledon final. final, which we'll talk about next, this would have been the greatest final of all time. Federer was going for a 5th Wimbledon title in a row, and Rafa had made it to the Wimbledon final once again. In a bid to stop the number 1, some incredible tennis from both players meant that we were treated to a first set tiebreak, which went Federer's way in thrilling fashion. The second set was taken by Rafa, and fans inside center court knew that something special was being readied. Roger, though, came roaring back to take the third after another intense tiebreak, but once again let his level drop as Rafa forced a 5th. Most emphatically, Federer would go on to win the 5th 6-2 and take his Wimbledon crown for the 5th time in a row, third the Wimbledon 2008 final. This time Federer was attempting to make it 6th in a row, and as expected, he was favorite coming in on this one. Nadal, though, had a plan and he executed it to perfection, taking the first 2 sets and shocking not only the crowd, but also Federer and his team. The Swiss maestro took his time and get used to the situation and leveled the match thanks to the tennis that wasn't of this world. He forced the 5th set and almost everyone knew that he would win it by now, but Nadal provided the twist in the tail. Nadal held on to his nerves, and then late in the game, he got the moment and he took it, winning the 5th set 9-7 and winning his first ever Wimbledon title. Many regard this as the greatest tennis match of all time, and we don't exactly disagree. And the 2017 Australian Open final. Fast forward some 9 years, both the players are in their 30s, ravaged with injuries, and the media and tennis world believe that both of them are on life support at this point. They're not wrong. Roger's returned from a massive injury. Rafa's not been lucky either, but by this moment, they were more friends than rivals. Federer won in 5, and it wasn't the first time we saw a 5-setter, so we won't get into that. It was the interview after the match. The Swiss maestro explained how it's sad that there aren't any draws in tennis, but he would have loved the match to finish in a draw. Lastly, the legacy. We enjoyed the best tennis rivalry in history for 2 decades, with the two surprising us on every occasion. It was wonderful to see them in action, but what made their rivalry even better was the mutual respect and admiration they had for one another. It was truly bigger than the sport in many ways. Federer helped with the launch of the uber-successful Rafa Nadal Tennis Academy. Rafa helped Federer out with many exhibition matches, raising money for charity. Many laughs were shared. If you haven't seen this video from their promotion of Match for Africa, do it right now. Many tears were shed, and when Federer finally called it a day, he did so in the same way it all began, playing doubles involving Nadal, but this time they were on the same side. They both let it all out on a special night in the Laver Cup, hand in hand, eyes full of tears. That's a wrap for this video. Which Nadal moment is your favorite of all time? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos just like it. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.